Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Adams, and I'm a marine forecaster at the National Hurricane Center. This is the weekly Tropical Atlantic Marine Weather Briefing. The Tropical Atlantic will see a fairly steady weather pattern this week, with small day-to-day changes expected across the basin. Some of the main impacts across the Atlantic will be pulsing strong to near gale force winds offshore of northwestern Colombia and in the Gulf of Venezuela through Wednesday, as a strong pressure gradient is maintained between high pressure in the central Atlantic and low pressure in the south central Caribbean. Winds are expected to decrease after Wednesday as the pressure gradient weakens a bit. Winds will also pulse to fresh to strong speeds each night in the Gulf of Honduras through Wednesday, with mostly fresh winds expected through the end of the week in this region. Localized near gale force winds will be possible Monday night into early Tuesday. In the western Atlantic, fresh to locally strong winds may occur offshore of northeastern Florida ahead of a series of fronts moving through the southern United States. Before we get to the forecast, it's worth mentioning that the tropics remain quiet in the Atlantic basin and no tropical cyclone activity is expected during the next 7 days. As a reminder, the Atlantic hurricane season runs through November 30th. Here's a look at the conditions across the Atlantic basin today. Most of the open waters are dominated by high pressure north of the area. Satellite imagery from earlier this afternoon denoted strong winds occurring in the central Caribbean as a strong pressure gradient prevails between high pressure to the north and low pressure over the south central Caribbean. These trade winds are supporting rough seas of 8 to 9 feet. Elsewhere, a tropical wave has been analyzed near 55 west, and this wave is expected to continue to trek westward through the Caribbean early this week. Otherwise, mainly moderate or weaker winds and slight to moderate seas are noted across the remainder of the Atlantic. For Monday, the pressure gradient will continue to strengthen between low pressure over the south central Caribbean and high pressure to the northeast, and fresh to strong winds will remain over the central Caribbean. Winds are expected to pulse locally to near gale force offshore of northern Colombia and in the Gulf of Venezuela, and rough seas will continue in this region as well. Farther west in the Gulf of Honduras, pulsing strong winds will develop Monday evening. In the open Atlantic, fresh to locally strong trade winds will lead to locally rough seas for areas east of the Lesser Antilles. Elsewhere, fresh winds will occur north of the Yucatan Peninsula and into the Bay of Campeche as a trough develops over the peninsula and migrates westward. Finally, fresh to locally strong winds may occur offshore of northeastern Florida ahead of a series of fronts moving through the southern United States. For Tuesday, fresh to strong winds and rough seas will continue in the central Caribbean. Pulsing fresh to locally strong trade winds in the tropical Atlantic will support rough seas expanding farther west towards the Lesser Antilles. Otherwise, little change is anticipated across the rest of the basin. Taking a look at Wednesday, winds will diminish slightly in the Caribbean Sea as low pressure weakens over the south central Caribbean and a tropical wave moves westward through the region. Rough seas will continue to be maintained by fresh trade winds east of the Lesser Antilles. Otherwise, gentle to moderate winds and moderate seas are expected for points farther north and through the Gulf of America as high pressure anchors over the central Atlantic. For Thursday, very little change is expected over the basin. High pressure continues to dominate the central Atlantic. Finally, for Friday, broad high pressure will continue to extend ridging over the Atlantic and the Gulf of America. Rough seas continue in the central Caribbean and east of the Lesser Antilles, maintained by fresh trade winds. Thank you for tuning in to the Tropical Atlantic Marine Weather Briefing. The next briefing will be posted by 5 p.m. on Thursday, June 12th. Have a safe week.